efforts on governance?
Thank you. Let me take a step back. Any multilateral, including the Inter-American Development Bank, functions as a partner to countries. We cannot go to a country and do activities or finance activities unless we have the consent of a government. That's a very important point to note. We cannot impose changes. And before I start discussing how the Inter-American Development Bank supports improvements in governance, I want to make 2 points that were raised yesterday and was mentioned just now. One was trust. What's the data on trust? So we financed last year LAPOP surveys. These are surveys typically done throughout Latin America, but very rarely done in the Caribbean. That was directed at generating data for crime in the Caribbean. Not all countries accepted that we could carry out that survey, particularly given that the condition was that information was made public. But one of the interesting features was that 30-40% of people say they trust their governments. That's a very low figure. So give some numbers to the problem of trust. That's a worldwide phenomenon. It's not just limited to the Caribbean. The second, this thing of data. A decade ago, the Inter-American Development Bank created a program to help statistical institutes improve the quality, the efficiency of their work. One of the conditions for joining that group was that household surveys would be made public. In fact, the IDB has a webpage where members who joined that program, there's an updated questionnaire, code books, and data. None of the Caribbean countries joined that initiative. And data is not a technical issue, it's a political issue. In fact, I think we could argue that it's deprivation of poor people. Poor people and vulnerable people don't have the lobbying power that rich and the powerful have. So by publishing data, by indicating the gravity of problem, and putting it in the political discourse and public discourse, this is a way that the size of the problem and the means of tackling it becomes clear. So data is not a technical problem, not a problem of financing, it's a political problem. So how does the idea, let me go now to governance, where those two issues are critical. Independently of the area of intervention, we basically do three things. We do studies. For example, a month ago, we published a report on governance in extractive industries. We finance conferences. So last December, we had a conference on governance in the Caribbean. That was, however, under the restriction of Chatham House rules, so it's a closed session. We do grants to different entities for them to do studies or activities. And we lend money. We're a bank, after all. Although we lend money at a concessional terms. We lend money to the private sector, where criteria of eligibility for a private sector loan is the governance structure of the corporation, which often means that many Caribbean firms are not eligible. But our main activity is lending to governments. So if I can get my presentation on. No? All right, next page. This is the basic manner in which the IDB thinks of the governance. Our objective is better service to citizens by the public sector, and we divide activities into 3 areas: effective government, efficient government, and open government. Next slide. So here is the detail of what actions the IDB finances, studies, gives grants to, if the governments agree. Very rarely is a particular operation, oh, super, but it doesn't work.
Only if it works.
Oh, but it doesn't work, unfortunately.
Where's the clicker?
And it's green instead of red. So what kind of things do we finance? These could be individually or collectively. So the first, directed at evidence-based policymaking, is data and information. That is to help planning and monitoring and evaluation. Monitoring and evaluation is critical to know what works, what doesn't work. And the Caribbean, very few programs and activities have been subject to monitoring and evaluation. Oh, I finished.
I swear, I did not touch a thing. Do finish the thought.
Oh, I have absolutely no idea what I was going to say unless I can see the slide. Get the
Should
slide
I
covered?
use that as a launch then? I swear, I did nothing.
I am deeply suspicious of the chairwoman of this session.
I don't think there's transparency or accountability here.
I will say that Inder promised to keep to 1 slide.
That was the slide, the
That
last
was the
slide.
slide. Right.
So, one of the, again, this is not a technical issue. One of the things that the bank finances is e-government, that is systems. You say, well, that's just a question of computers, software. Well, the question is whether you should have something off the shelf or you design something particular for a particular country. However, when you relate it to data on graft, so if the enterprise surveys, for example, asks businessmen, if you do a particular transaction with the government to get a license, to get electricity, to get construction permit, to get import license, or just to get things done. It's incredible the number of transactions which are done only if you give monetary resources to the public servant, according to this survey. What does e-government do? E-government eliminates that discretion. So you have all this idea that you just fill in electronically, there's a criteria for eligibility, and you get your, not only fast, without interference from any particular individual, you can also consolidate things into one stop. That's one of the activities that the IDB does. As you can imagine, given its political cost, often implementation gaps occur because you're trying to take away resources from individuals. So that's a particular area. To summarize, so it's those 3 areas that I mentioned previously. When a government wants to improve governance, it requests so from the IDB, and the IDB designs with the government operations of lending to tackle the particular issues that the government and the IDB agree on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Inder. And I think that's a wonderful place to build from, Professor Clayton. I'm very much looking forward to hearing your recommendations on how applying the foresighting technique will improve our visioning, planning, and implementation.
Thank you. I'm probably better with
And
this
better
too.
luck with the slides.
Could we have my slides, please? That's the one. Good morning. Goodness. Everybody asleep? Good morning. Just checking. Thank you. Now, over the last couple of days, we've heard a lot. Which way should I point this? About the kind of critical constraints that we face in this region. We've talked about the very high rates of violence, crime and corruption, inefficient government bureaucracies, slow justice systems, low conviction rates, narrow economic base, high levels of debt. In some cases, not this one obviously, high cost of energy. Our ability to do research, we're only investing about a fifth of the amount that we would need to be able to do cutting-edge research. We only have one university in the whole of Latin America and the Caribbean, in the world's top 200 universities. That's the University of Sao Paulo in Brazil. Very high rates of youth unemployment and underemployment, pattern of low and intermittent growth. This looks like a fairly daunting array of problems, but this is the important part. Every single one of them has a solution. Is this clicker not working? Could you? Thank you. Every single one of these problems is solvable. And let me give you an example by talking through one of the ones that looks particularly difficult. Advance one slide, please. And let's talk about how to grow our economies. Now, over the last few days, couple of days, we've had a lot of perspectives which are really political perspectives. So let's do the economics 101. There are actually only two ways that you can grow an economy. One is you can increase the size of the workforce, and the other is that you can make each worker more productive. One click, please. We are actually in an interesting position because we can do both. To increase the size of your workforce, it doesn't mean you have to increase the size of your population. What we can do is encourage people to transition between the informal to the formal sector, provide better training to move people into higher value added forms of activity, remove the barriers to employment, abolish mandatory retirement and so forth. All of these can increase the effective size of your workforce. And then to make the workforce more productive, we can make better use of technology, remove the impediments to investment, which are many, and use training programs to enhance the skill base. Right, here's the million-dollar question, especially for educators like myself. Training people to do what? You can't just talk about education and training in an abstract sense. What do you train them to do? We have seen a lot of government programs in this region that basically are subsidies for dying industries or training people to do basically meaningless work on the public payroll. This is absolutely not the sort of thing I'm talking about here. This has been a big problem for us. What we have to do is concentrate on increasing the supply of trained, skilled labor in the sunrise business areas. So the questions we should be asking ourselves is, which forms of economic activity are in fact about to disappear? Where are the new business opportunities and emerging business opportunities? And then we can say, what should we be training people to do? What kind of skill base will they need in future? Now, there's a few key points that we have to bear in mind. One is that every time we invent a new technology or a new business model, of course, by so doing, we create more wealth,